We have constantly shown that no, it won't. It's not going to save you money. In fact, it's going to cost you dearly. And hydrogen is just another example.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of PowerGab, your go-to show for all things energy and environmental policy in the state of Colorado. I'm co-host Jake Fogleman, joined by my other co-host Amy Cooke from hot and humid North Carolina. She's out there fighting the heat.
100%. Listen, this is when you're thankful for air conditioning.
Yeah, absolutely. We're recording just a day before another heat wave is supposed to hit Colorado, so we'll be in a similar boat, although, as you like to point out, it's a dry heat here, so we can't really complain quite as much.
True. You have better hair days.
That's right. But this week's episode, we want to talk about a particular topic that we've referenced a couple of times in the past with a few other episodes, but we really want to kind of drill down a little bit deeper because not only have we published a new study on the topic, but it's sort of become a lot more pertinent in the public discussion because of people like Governor Polis and some of his regulatory agencies. And that topic is hydrogen. Hydrogen is a concept that has been around for decades in energy. There's hydrogen-powered vehicles have been talked about for a long time. In fact, there was the famous Hindenburg that was a form of a hydrogen vehicle that ended poorly, I think it's safe to say. Most people are familiar with that. But a lot of people now that we're talking about decarbonization view hydrogen as a potential silver bullet solution for things like replacing natural gas or, whether that's in turbines or in industrial uses. They think hydrogen can be the carbon-free fuel that replaces natural gas. And unfortunately, we have to rain on that parade just a little bit, I think, once you look at some of the cost figures. But for a little bit more background on just how much this hydrogen boosterism is going on, the Biden administration has already devoted, I think, $7 billion to basically provide seed money to localities to create what are called hydrogen hubs so that states like Colorado and other regions of the country can start investing in this stuff. The state of Colorado, for its part, has also created new tax credits and subsidies for hydrogen production. And the Energy Office report that we covered a few episodes back bakes hydrogen into its model. It's apparently the cheapest scenario to reach carbon-free electricity by 2040 involves adding 6 gigawatts of hydrogen. So this stuff is clearly in the state's plans. It's in the federal government's plans. And it's something that they're relying on heavily to, like I said, provide that silver bullet. The only problem with that is, other than these, disastrous Hindenburg exploding vehicles, there's not really any case study we can point to where hydrogen's actually come to fruition and it's been used. And another problem is that it's quite expensive. And we have this brand new paper showing what some of those costs are going to be. We'll link to it in the show notes so our listeners can check it out in depth. But I'll kick it over to you after I read the title because I think the title's great. It captures really what's going on here. This is from Trevor Lewis, who's a friend of ours. He works for Always On Energy Research. And it's called Colorado Energy Office's Economic Hindenburg, the Ballooning Costs of the Hydrogen Transition. So if you want to take it away, Amy, about what this issue brief found.
Yeah, so this is kind of interesting because, first of all, I agree with you on the title. Title says it all. And for those of you, for the young folks out there who don't know history, go look up the Hindenburg. To Jake's point, it didn't end well, and the ballooning costs there's a reason why that language was utilized in this particular case. A couple of things we need to remember, Jake. One is that, and I love the way Trevor Lewis phrases this, and he's a fellow with Always On Energy Research, and he's the one who wrote this paper, and I love his language on this. And I'm actually going to quote him. I've got my paper here. He said, "Despite promises of a clean hydrogen-powered future, hydrogen production and distribution," so both of those, production and distribution, "are still avant-garde technologies. Retooling the economy to prematurely run on hydrogen will cost Coloradans dearly." Now, think about avant-garde. It means, it's different, let's put it this way, it's unique. It's not it's not mainstream of in any way, shape, or form. So he calls hydrogen technology and in both distribution and production an avant-garde technology. You don't want that in your energy, your electricity distribution system. You don't want something that's avant-garde. I want tried, true, tested, reliable. I want it to actually power my light when I flip the switch. Avant-garde might be cool in your artwork or your clothing or your sense of fashion. It is not cool in electricity. It is the last thing you want. And then he goes on to say it will cost Coloradans dearly. So let me remind everybody, what have we said and repeated to them pretty much in every single show? Governor Polis and the state legislature, the Democrat-controlled state legislature, has said that this energy transition, which I call a forced march, is going to save Coloradans money. It's going to save you money. We have constantly shown that no, it won't. It's not going to save you money. In fact, it's going to cost you dearly. And hydrogen is just another example. The Colorado Energy Office found that no, wind, solar, plus batteries won't save Coloradans money. In fact, it's the single most expensive way to decarbonize the state. So what do? Well, let's throw in the avant-garde technology, hydrogen. Let's just do hydrogen. We'll power the state. Whatever we need that we can't get from wind and solar because it's too expensive or there are reliability issues, we'll do hydrogen. The problem is no one's ever done it on a large scale. So there are a couple of things you need to know. One, can you power a turbine with it? Well, yeah, maybe. I mean, all of that is possible. But again, no large scale case studies on that. The other thing they want to do, and Excel actually suggested it, is blending hydrogen into the natural gas mix or just sending hydrogen into natural gas pipes and powering people's homes with hydrogen. That's a really bad idea. Hence the name Hindenburg, the word Hindenburg in the title. So what do you have to do to get there? If we're going to be a case study on this, and I hope we're not. I hope Colorado isn't. But one of the things you'd have to do is go through roughly 35,000 miles of pipeline in Colorado to see natural gas pipeline, to see if what needs to be done to retrofit it for hydrogen. It will cost billions. It's going to cost billions. And let's say you have to build a whole new pipeline system just to accommodate hydrogen. Well, now you're upwards of $1 trillion. I'm not seeing where this is going to save ratepayers money. And remember, avant-garde technology. The other thing with this is that the cost of it. So we've talked about cost, and the governor's office on there said $61 billion for wind, solar, and batteries. What they claim for, if you throw hydrogen in the mix, it'll just be $51 billion to move away from coal, natural gas, and our renewable mixture that we have right now. If we go with wind, solar, batteries, and now add in hydrogen, if we do that, the potential, and there's a range of estimates, right? And Trevor does a good job of putting those into the paper. But if they have to retool like the pipeline infrastructure, they have to redo it. Actually, I think that the number was if they had to retrofit, say, 50% of it, you're talking about $72,000 over 15 years for every ratepayer in Colorado. Wrap your mind around that. $72,000 for every ratepayer. They would have that would be their bill. Is it any wonder why Colorado is dropping spots on CNBC's rankings on business climate in the state? We are, and the two things that Colorado gets marked down for, cost of living and quality of life. Those two things, if you add on $72,000 onto every single ratepayer over the next 15 years, not only will you keep businesses away, you are literally going to push people out of the state. It will become unaffordable. And what makes me, I want to say it's not even crazy. What is so, it's malfeasance. Let me put it that way. The malfeasance on the part of the elected officials leading this state and not looking at cost. I mean, seriously taking into consideration the cost of these energy policies. I think it's malfeasance. It is high time that we start holding them accountable and answering this. Even if it only cost $51 billion. Did anybody vote on that? Do we really want to spend $51 billion to retool Colorado's power generation and distribution system? But I'm saying this, and what this paper shows is that 51 billion is a lowball number. It's a low number because they don't take into consideration a whole bunch of things. We've already talked about it. They don't take into consideration transmission lines. But in this case, they don't take into consideration the cost of going in and retrofitting our pipeline distribution system in the state. And all of that, listen, Xcel ain't going to pay for that. Customers will pay for that. And at this point, we're looking at $72,000 to retrofit Colorado's existing pipeline and distribution system, just so that Governor Polis and those leading at the legislative leaders under the Gold Dome, just so that they can claim they decarbonized Colorado. They don't bother. They can't be bothered to look at what the actual cost is going to be to individual Coloradans, to businesses, to the entire economy of the state. They are just taking it over a cliff, and they use these fanciful, avant-garde, I love that word, avant-garde technologies, and they just throw it out like, oh yeah, of course we're going to power the state with this, yet no one has ever done it. I don't want Colorado to be the guinea pig.
Yeah, those are great points that you made, because I wanted to point that out as well. As we talked about the Energy Office study produced sort of a range of scenarios, and obviously we hit on the fact that the wind, solar, and batteries one was the most expensive, and it was sort of ruled out. But they also looked at higher penetrations of things like geothermal and advanced nuclear. And say what you want about those technologies, they're relatively nascent stage, but at least they've been proven in certain places. They exist in certain places. But what they decided on was the scenario with the highest amount of hydrogen, which has not been proven at such a scale. That's the one, that's the cheap one that we're going to go for. Oh, and by the way, it's cheap because we didn't include all these other costs that you have to take into account, let alone transmission lines, reevaluating the entire gas distribution and service line maintenance to make sure that and listeners can read the paper to get the technical details, but when you put it, you can't just one-to-one put hydrogen in a gas pipeline. It causes problems. It makes things brittle. Hydrogen can escape. Hydrogen's very volatile. You don't want that stuff escaping, especially if it's being piped into your home, which is what's obviously being envisioned here. It's a little bit frightening stuff. And for that to be written out of the costs, and then for them to say that's the cheap scenario for 100% decarbonization is a terrible sleight of hand.
Jake, I feel like energy policy in Colorado is so unserious that it is caught in this perpetual Saturday Night Live skit, this kind of theme of it's crazy, we're just throwing stuff out there, and it's so unserious, and it's, oh yeah, we're saving ratepayers money, and meanwhile we're literally just throwing money into a money pit and setting it on fire. It's just like they can't be serious on this. They say they're thoughtful people, but this is If you look at it, there's no way any of this is going to happen, yet we'll continue to chase this fantasy and throw money after it. But we're not, the state will not be powered with wind, solar, and batteries and hydrogen. We might try, but it isn't actually going to succeed.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that I'm pretty bearish that we're going to have 6 gigawatts of hydrogen capacity, producing electricity for everyone, and hydrogen going into homes to, produce heat or what have you. One thing I think is notable is shortly after our paper was published, the Energy and Carbon Management Commission, which used to be called the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, they produced a study. One was on geothermal, but the other one was on hydrogen, mostly on storage and pipeline maintenance. And what's funny is the folks actually in charge with crafting regulations around this stuff were pretty hesitant on hydrogen. They said, yeah, in theory, this could happen, but here's all the existing regulations, and we really do need to craft a bunch of new regulations because this stuff can be pretty volatile, and it's kind of new. And oh, by the way, environmental justice is a factor that we've baked into our regulations, which we talked about last episode, and that's obviously going to pose new problems. So we have to do cumulative impact statements. So there's all these red flags that the regulators are throwing up, saying maybe we'll get some hydrogen one day, but you wouldn't know that from the statements from Governor Polis and some of the state legislators on this stuff. But in that vein, I do want to hit on, before we send it over to you for takeaways, some of the policy recommendations that Trevor left the paper with, because I think they're important and I think they're spot on. And one of them was, as a dominant theme of this episode, one of them was simply give us a proper cost-benefit analysis of this stuff. Don't hide the ball in, it's $51 billion, but we're not going to tell you what that means per person, and we're also not going to include all these other costs. No, give us an actual per kilowatt cost, what it's going to mean for we the ratepayers who have no choice in paying these costs, and include everything, include the pipeline maintenance, include the pipeline review. Then we can have an honest conversation about, is this something we should be going forward with? Because to your point, I don't think people will voluntarily agree to this stuff once they see the cost. So no hiding the football, cost-benefit analysis. And then the other one is just a simple good governance recommendation. It's establish best practices around hydrogen development. Look, if the private sector wants to experiment and do some R&D with hydrogen, by all means, maybe they'll hit a breakthrough. But in the meantime, don't play around with this stuff, as we've also hit on. It's a very volatile compound that we have historical precedent for going very badly. So, let's be smart about this stuff. Let's not rush this just for the sake of hitting decarbonization goals. Let's let the private sector do what it needs to do before we start pushing this stuff through government fiat. So I think those are great recommendations. Obviously, like I said before, we'll have this linked in the show notes so people can check it out for themselves. We'll kick it over to you, Amy, sort of to take us away here, what your major takeaways are on this topic.
Yeah, I've got 3. I'm trying to keep them narrowed down to 3. I realized one time I did 4, but I get carried away. One is, and you hit on it, and it's part of our policy recommendations, but it's this. Be careful with hydrogen. Be careful with it. It is volatile. Just throwing it into people's pipelines, pipelines into homes, into residential homes, has the potential to be dangerous. Be careful with it, and also be honest with it, right? So be mindful of hydrogen. Don't just throw it out there like, oh, we're just going to add hydrogen to it. Let's just do that. It has the potential to be dangerous. It also has the potential to be great, but we have not gotten there yet. The other takeaway is we should be doing a cost-benefit analysis on every single resource. Every single one. We should know this about every single resource, and then let Coloradans decide how they want to power the state. And if you're going to include environmental justice, and I'm not saying don't, but I think we need to expand the definition of environmental justice to mean amount of land that is needed. Environmental justice it could also include ratepayer justice. Should ratepayers be forced to pay far more money for an inferior product? I think that those are conversations we should have. So be careful with hydrogen. Do a cost-benefit on every single energy resource that Colorado is currently using and could consider using in the future, including nuclear. And then lastly, say this all the time, and we found out, get a generator. I was talking with some friends in Galveston, and no generator. It talk about hot and humid. Now, you don't even have to have a generator that can turn on the air conditioner, just have one that runs a fan. At least you could have that, but also but you could have a small air conditioner or a small refrigerator that you can plug in to save some of your food, or if you have medicine that needs to be refrigerated. The other thing is you can keep your phone charged, all those other things. Get a generator. And as I say, get a generator with diverse energy resources. My portfolio for my generators involves a number of different ways to charge the generator or to power the generator. So that's it.
Evergreen advice and important advice, as you pointed out. It has real world consequences. And I want to add one takeaway, more of like a teaser than a takeaway, but for listeners that are interested in this topic, this isn't going to be the last study we do on hydrogen because it's been such a big topic and it's suddenly become the silver bullet to meeting all of Colorado's climate needs and other states as well. We'll have a more in-depth study coming later, probably in the next couple of months, but you guys can stay tuned for that. We'll talk more about it when that study comes out. But until then, that does it for us for another episode of PowerGab. If you like what you heard here, you can head on over to iitv.org to check out our entire back catalog. We do new episodes every week. You can also suggest show topics and guest suggestions at info@powergab.org. We love hearing from our listeners. And if you're not a visual person and you like just listening to your podcasts, we're available wherever you get your audio podcasts, from Spotify to iTunes, so check us out there. But until next time, we'll see you.